Now, since we last spoke to her in 2002, a lot has happened to Björk. She and her boyfriend Matthew Barney have had a daughter. She's moved to a new house in Reykjavik, and now she divides her time between Iceland and New York. She's made another outstandingly original album, this time using only the sounds of human voices, mainly her own. And when I went to meet up with her in Iceland last month, I asked her first why she decided to dispense with all instruments.
Well, it wasn't a decision I made before I did the album. I kind of sat down last autumn after coming from tour. It must have been like September 2003. And I had several songs then ready that I'd been sort of working on. And then I sat there and I was listening and I was like, this is weird, this is not working. And then I started playing with the buttons on the mixing desk, and it was literally like I muted some stuff, and then I listened to like, that's better. And then I go, oh, I muted all the instruments. And then I started either replacing the instrument with my voice or just simply erasing them piece by piece by piece. And then I arranged for an Icelandic choir. I'd done arrangements and none two the same, like really different colours. And then so I came here on Christmas to Iceland to record that. And when I sat down and listened to all of that, I was like, I've got a vocal album.
So some of the songs began life as songs with instruments and had the instruments basically taken out of them. Which songs were those?
Where's the Line was a song that I had played live. Who is it? And Decide Constellation was something I did on the tour. That's actually got a funny story because that's the only track that a friend of mine who did remixes, actually I think I played it on your program, Olivier Alari from Ensemble. He'd sent me a CD with a few sketches or finished tracks or whatever and said, yeah, if you ever feel like using those, please do. And then a year later, I wrote this melody, and I was singing it actually here in Iceland in, I think it was January 2004, in a cabin. It's by a lake here, half an hour from Reykjavik. You should go there, it's really, really lovely. And that was like my first little trips away from my little girl, where I would go 3 hours a day to this cabin by the lake and do whatever I could and then drive back to town. And then I would sing several versions of this melody, and then I would say, wait a minute, there's this thing that Olivier gave me a year ago. And then I sang it to that. And it fitted perfect together, like just took these two things. It was really incredible. And then when I came back from the tour and discovered that the whole album was going to be a vocal album, and then I thought, wait a minute, what about this song here? You know, I really like this song and it should be on the album. So I started doing choir arrangements for it. And I did a really complicated choir arrangement and for like 16-piece choir, and they recorded 3 times doing totally different things. So it was like 50 tracks of voices, and I was kind of like, it wasn't right, so I was editing it all, and I spent like days and weeks editing it, and it never was right. And then 2 weeks ago, I emailed Olivier and I said, listen, I've tried everything with this track, but I can't just be like dogmatic about this album. At the end of the day, the best music's got to win. So I think I'm just going to stick to your old version, because I think that's still the best one. And then he just said, guess what? I made it out of your own voice. No, so he actually made it. He did remixes for me for Vespertine, and he actually took a voice of mine saying, like, I'm not sure what to do with it, and did a song out of that, and then sent it to me and didn't tell me, just in case I wouldn't, you know, whatever, or it was just a secret.
It's tricky when you feel someone has done something on your behalf. It's slippery when sense of justice. Murmurs underneath, and it's asking you, how am I going to make it right?
Triumph of a Heart, the last track on the album, is very interesting. It sounds almost like a kind of pastiche of some of your early, more dancey, beaty sort of songs. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, I guess in like March, when I realised, okay, I've got a vocal album on my hands, and I started worrying about everybody thinking, oh, Björk's doing a vocal album, it's going to be a horrible avant-garde Yoko Ono experience, you know, with full respect for Yoko Ono. It's like, ooh, like, or something like that, and it's a bit easy, you know. So I thought, okay, just one prankster song at the end of the album, just to prove them wrong. That you could do a totally sort of pop song. And also just that fact that vocal-only album doesn't have to be for the chosen few, you know. I actually, last couple of years, when I got drunk, I would end up kind of trying to influence everybody to turn off the PA or Ghetto Blast or wherever we've been partying, and let's do the disco music ourselves and cover our favorite dance tracks just a cappella. So one person would do the beat, the next person would do the bass line or whatever, and it was just so much fun. So I've sort of been doing it with my mates anyway, you know, kind of like, and I actually got some of them on dictaphone, which is pretty horrid, but they were fun. You sort of had to be there, but some good, I think death metal and basically all heavy metal songs are excellent a cappella. I really recommend it with a group of friends.
It's certainly true that one starts listening to this record expecting it to be challenging, I think is the word people often use. And it has got, and we have to say, it's got some of your most beautiful songs, including one of my favourites, Mouth's Cradle. How did that song come about?
It's one of the first time when I was walking about, when I was still breastfeeding, and I guess it's sort of, in a way, about that sort of nourishment and your mouth and just the joy of it, and maybe trying to make up some sort of musical about the mouth. And you know, when this kind of Busby Berkeley thing, when the mouth is huge and you get Fred Astaire to do some tap dancing routines, like walking up the teeth. The way I did it, I was so certain that I was going to do this album intuition only, no more brain, please. So I went to the forest and just recorded with a dictaphone, just sort of I think you call it stream of consciousness or whatever, and sang a lot, and then I just came back and put it unedited into the computer, and usually I would probably sit down and edit that sort of lyric and kind of like make it make more sense, but this time around I just wasn't interested in sense anymore. And I happened to have I had a library of my voice doing with effects that I'd collected while I was pregnant, and it happened that one of those samples, like which is in the beginning there, fitted. Actually, two of them now, both the very, very beginning noise and the second noise that ends up being the theme that goes through, are things I found in two separate moments during my pregnancy and my science phase, I guess.
worms like, and his teeth are ladder up to his mouth. All his teeth are a ladder that I walk, that you can walk to. If you want up to the mouth's cradle, up to that mouth's cradle. He always has a hope for me, always sees me when nothing has, and everyone have life can tell that goes is brighter than anyone, and who fails me with hope, those beams assure me. And you can use these teeth as a ladder up to the mouth's cradle, the mouth's cradle. And you can follow these notes I'm singing up to the mouth's cradle, the mouth's cradle. The simplicity of the ghost-like beast, the purity of what it wants and where it goes. Always loves you, always loves it infrared love.
Let's talk about the throat singing component, which is most noticeable on the track called Piano 2. How did that come about?
Well, when I was gathering together the Inuit choir for Vespertine tour, which I went on Greenland on holiday and ended up putting a note in the supermarket and auditioning. They were all kind of girls that maybe hadn't sung a lot, and I kind of wanted that sort of amateur element. After trying really classically trained choirs, that I felt the Vespertine tour needed something kind of more amateurish and kind of more natural, ethnic or whatever. Then I kind of went on the search, and actually it was Einar who knew a guy who had gone to northern Canada to a village of 200 people and found this throat singer who'd kind of made throat singing into something totally different, because partly throat singing is like certain pattern making, which partly women do in her tribe, and they compete who can do it longer. But it's just supposed to be a pattern. It's supposed to be totally non-emotional. It's more like a technical thing. And she is the first one to actually put emotion into it. You should see her sing sometimes on her own, because she's like the little Edith Piaf of throat singing. She will go to like the biggest heartbreak, painful, and jump straight into the most euphoric thing ever. So she's kind of doing that thing. It's kind of her invention, really, to make these noises emotional and passionate. So basically, she jumped on the middle of my tour and kind of sang on top of like an orchestra and a choir, basically 70 people on stage. And I kind of ended up saying to her, listen, that's a bit of a waste, you know? You're not just some special effect person. You're somebody you want to go to a desert island on and record a double album with. And we kind of promised each other we would meet later one-on-one, where I just had the capacity to put all my energy in just her. And then little did we know that it actually took 3 years to come about. And by then, that time, we met on a tiny island, funnily enough, La Gomera, which is one of the islands of Canary Islands, but probably the non-touristy one, which is really, really rocky, like a sort of volcanic sort of rainforest island. And we turned up there, both with little baby girls. A lot of things had happened since last time. And she sang on a lot of my songs. And that song, which now is called Ancestors, is probably the one song we started on just from scratch on, and sort of is co-written by it. But the other ones, she probably sort of sang on already existing songs.
a bit about the one of the tracks that you recorded for instruments, which sounds fantastic actually without the instruments, although it's got a much more pop structure. Who is it?
Who Is It is probably the oldest track on Medulla, and it kind of almost made it on Vespertine. And then it was just too much flesh and bones and up and kind of... it just didn't... It was just so physical track. It didn't fit into the whole Vespertine kind of ghost, non-muscular, whatever. So I waited with it. So I guess I did try a lot of different stuff with this track, and I did an instrument version of it, and it just wasn't right. Actually, this is the one track that's kind of had like at least 12 versions. There's always some tracks just come like the first time around, and certain tracks are just tricky. And I just when I have tracks like that, I just remind myself of songs like one old track from my Bachelorette, which actually there was 17 versions of it until it was right. And I listened to it the other day when I was compiling for the family tree, and some of the versions are just horrid, you know. So Who Is It was a bit like that, but I guess with Who Is It, it finally fell into place when Rizal, the human beatboxer, came, and I sent him a CD of it, and he'd lived with it for 2 days, and then he came to the studio, and all the beat that is in that song now is him in one take. There's no layers, there's no nothing. It's just one take. So now actually that track is like maybe 5 tracks or something. That's it. So he kind of like, I just decided to make it a celebration of beatboxing, this track.
Who is this Roussel character? How did you meet him?
Well, when I found out that this was going to be a vocal-only album, the first thing I thought, well, with the musical fascist in me, which is, you know, a bit of a monster, he thought, okay, I'm not going to do a Manhattan Transfer Bobby McFerrin album. There's certainly not going to be any beatboxers on this album, because that would be such an easy way out. So I recorded most of this album without that sort of stuff. And then in March, Mike Patton took me to a show and introduced me to Rizal. And he's just one of those people that it's just above and beyond the genre he's working in. Like, he was doing like Kraftwerk tracks on his own, like doing all the noises in a Kraftwerk track just live at the same time in a mic. But it totally didn't sound like... It was just like incredible. So he came first to the studio and did 2 tracks, and then he came again and did 2 more, and then I think he ended up doing like, I don't even know how many tracks he ended up on. But he just any noise in the universe. You could ask him to do soap bubbles and he would do it, and it's just incredible.
If you ask yourself patiently and carefully, who is it? Who is it? Who is it? But never let you down. Who is it? But gave you back your crown, and the ornaments are, they're going around. Now we're handing it over. They're handing it over, handing it over. Who is it that never let you down? Who is it that gave you back your crown? And the ornaments are, they're going around. Now they're handing it over, handing it over.
Björk, am I right in thinking that I can hear the vocal presence on the track called Submarine of Robert Wyatt?
Yeah, I guess Robert Wyatt is probably the person that came last into the album. I mean, I always knew about him, obviously, and as I know about a lot of incredible vocalists. But it wasn't until May, when I actually had finished mixing the album, which I thought, when I was sat down and said, wait a minute, there's some element missing here. And I felt that I probably put so much importance in getting all those incredible singers to do layers and layers and layers, that I was actually missing the old school narrative, soulful singer, you know. And so I called Robert up, and he was totally up for it. And I sent him a CD the next day. And in space of 4 days, I was there and put up a little studio in his bedroom. And I think we were going to like just chill and take it easy, but I think he actually ended up singing all his vocals that day. And then we got drunk in the evening and I got told a lot of really great stories. And him and his wonderful wife. Next day we woke up and listened to it and we were going to like do more stuff. And we just thought it was perfect as it was. And then we just packed our bags and went home.
That was Björk with a bit of help there from her friend and indeed ours, Robert Wyatt. That's a track called Submarine from Björk's soon-to-be-released album Medúlla, which will be out as ever on One Little Indian. And medulla, she explained to me, is the Latin word for marrow, as in bone marrow, and it designates, she says, something to do with the soft, squidgy centre of things, and she was very keen to emphasise this aspect of life and her experience in the wake of her having had another child, and also something to do with 9/11.
I found it quite difficult to get into this album, I have to say.
Well, I expected to, but I have to say I found it, in some ways, her most beguiling record for a while. I think the song structures are really quite almost poppy at times. There's plenty of, delightful sort of melodic hooks there. And I just think the constant surprises that she visits on us with basically the software program she puts all these voices through. And, of course, her voice sounds like it's gone through 3 software programs before she even does anything to it.